Now, we've had two retirements in quick succession from two women who are still very much at the peak of their powers. They are different cases, and we'll go into both, because there are some subtleties involved with Lizelle Lee, which have become apparent in the last week with an excellent interview she did on the BBC Stumped podcast with Ali Mitchell. And Deandra Dottin, bombshell. You were only watching her play yesterday for Barbados. Yeah. And she's released a statement on iPhone Notes, which is the way these days.
Sure.
It was dated 1 July. I think she probably meant to write 1 August because she played during July. But anyway,
31 July,
let's ignore that. But the point is, with Lizelle Lee, as we expected, we were a little bit wrong with how we framed our chat the other week. Because we were reading between the lines, we thought it might have been all about her want to play domestic cricket. Well, it turns out that she did want to do both, but there was resistance inside the South African setup to do with basically her weight.
Yeah, they had ruled that she was not meeting fitness standards, and that essentially it was held up as a deal, right? If you want to go and play in the 100, you won't get the certificate. So an NOC is a no objection certificate, if you don't know the lingo, that a home board has to give to a contracted player to allow them to go and play anywhere else, to go and play in a domestic league in another country, something like that. So Cricket South Africa had said to her, unless you lose a certain amount of weight and fit into these standards that we want, we won't give you the NOC, so we'll block you from playing in the 100, which means we'll block you from earning a bunch of money, a lot more than Cricket South Africa can pay for a yearly salary for their female players. We'll stop you from playing in the 100 unless you can comply with this direction.
Yeah, and there's a lot going on here. So one of the parts of this interview is that Lizelle Lee's got a young family, recently had a child with her partner, so thus there's this kind of financial imperative, right? And there is a multi-speed economy in women's cricket. There's the money you can get from being an Australian cricketer or an English cricketer, and increasingly an Indian cricketer too. And then there's the money you get if you're not playing in one of those nations.
Sure.
So that's the first thing to consider. So, being on the top line of rankings for the 100, or the second top line, means quite a bit as a woman relative to what you can make in a 12-month cycle.
She's later into her career anyway. She probably doesn't have a lot of years left. Therefore, it's like she has to earn what she can while she can.
Yeah, and there's other bits here too. So she wasn't actually able to have her weight taken initially, at least, when she was at home. So they took a reading. The next day they took a skin fold reading, and she didn't get her weight taken on that second day when it was being monitored, because she felt anxious about her weight having fluctuated up overnight. And what if one reading was inconsistent with the other? So she didn't, which was within her rights to do so. And the next time she had her weight taken, it was much higher than the first reading. So there were these different numbers floating around, who was measuring it, what was fair game to do on your own, and all of that kind of thing. It meant that Hilton Marine, the coach of the South African team, he was quite evasive when first asked about it. The suggestion now is that they were intentionally not trying to draw attention to the fact that it was to do with her weight. They were trying to be sensitive to that. But, I mean, at what cost? All it meant was that there was a number of weeks of speculation until Lizelle got to tell her own story.
Yeah, but I mean, and this is a highly complicated thing when watching and assessing women's sport, is that because there's so much this kind of overwhelming pressure on women about body image, weight, and all the rest of it. This insane focus on something which isn't necessarily a measure of good health or bad health. It can be, but it's not always. That whenever it's talked about, it's easy to say, well, you should just talk about it bluntly and neutrally, like you would anything else, or like you would with men or whatever. It's not the same as with men, because it doesn't come with hundreds of years of social baggage. It doesn't come with all of the loading, all of the inference that is attached to certain words, to certain descriptions, to the way that women are assessed and commodified and objectified rather than treated as the individuals and the athletes that they are. It just doesn't have the same baggage that comes along with it as it does when talking about men's sport. Some of that comes into it in men's sport, but it is inherently a different thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that weight was used as the reason for her not getting picked in Ireland recently and for this series in England, that was the risk that she was going to be dropped again. Lizelle's saying that she didn't receive support from CSA to lose weight. I mean, even something as simple as that.
Sure.
And all of what you're referring to there about the historical baggage around the way women who are seen to be overweight are described and all the rest of it. It is sensitive. But I think that by leaving that vacuum, if you like, they didn't help themselves. They would have that they would have that they shouldn't have put her in a situation
Yeah.
where she had to go out and do the big tell-all interview. This could have been
Sure.
handled in a better way than it was. And
But it,
now
you know,
and there's another part to this, is that the other fitness tests that she has to do, according to the interview, she was fine with them. I assume that's like bleep tests and other bits and bobs, running
Right.
tests.
Yep.
So from her perspective, her cricket fitness, her batting fitness was still sufficient to
Right.
play at the top level. And I mean, I know she's had a poor year in one-day cricket in 2022, but it's only 12 months ago that she was ranked number 1 in the world. So you're allowed to have a bad year or whatever and still be picked in the team. So
Yep.
form is a small part of this, but you can't tell me that she isn't playing in the Commonwealth Games if she's available to be selected. Of course she is.
Right, and the way that, say, South Africa bombed in a run chase the other day against New Zealand, where their two openers came out, got stifled, got suffocated, poked the ball around, couldn't score it better than a runner ball. You know, I mean, Lizelle, yeah, she's the kind of player who might be caught at cover for 2, but she's also the kind of player who might get you 60 off 35 and
genuine match winner.
Turbocharge that kind of run chase.
And it's remained so as well. So it's not as though, like there is a form thing, 80-odd runs in 8 games this year or something, but it's deeper than that. And credit to Ali Mitchell for getting the interview and to Lizelle Lee for being willing to tell her story, because, and let's hope there's a way through this as well, I should add. I mean, I know she's currently retired, but it's not without precedent for athletes to come out of retirement, and I hope that there is some middle ground where she can get the NOC she requires. That's the other thing, by the way. I hope she gets the NOC. Because South Africa could deny her that.
A board still has control over an athlete, I think up to 2 years after they've retired under ICC rules, probably to avoid this kind of thing of saying, well, I'll just get out from underneath the obligations of the umbrella and then come back later.
And so it goes for Deandra Dottin. Now, this was even more surprising. Playing yesterday for Barbados, 31 years of age, still very much in the middle of her career. I saw her dominate games at the fair break only a few months ago, and she had that wonderful run before the World Cup this year where she made a truckload of runs against South Africa and against New Zealand, and now has found herself making this decision. And it is a very strongly worded statement by athlete standards. She says here that she's going to play domestic cricket, but she's done after 14 years as a West Indies player. There have been many obstacles in my cricketing career. However, the current climate and team environment has been non-conducive to my ability to thrive and reignite my passion. She later says, this is stronger again, I realise I'm no longer able to adhere to team culture and team environment as it's undermined my ability to perform excellently. I mean, there's clearly something going on in the dressing room, right? But again, whatever's going on in the dressing room, she's retiring in the middle of the Commonwealth Games at 31, an outstanding cricketer, crucial to their fortunes as a West Indies women's side. She'll need to get an NOC as well. Now, the bit going on there.
Well, quite a bit going on there. And it's notable, yes, it's in the middle of the Commonwealth Games, but she's playing for Barbados here, not playing for West Indies, which is interesting as well. So her last West Indies turnout would have been in the 50-over World Cup. In some ways, I think maybe she's just tired. I mean, she's been pretty much carrying this team for a long time. She was the first kind of genuine superstar in that West Indies lineup. She's so often been the one that they rely on more than anybody else, bat, ball, field, whatever it is. You could never say that she's someone who hasn't put in. Like, remember her breaking her face in the Big Bash fielding, so desperate to try to stop a boundary that she smashed her head into the ground. I mean, horrific injury, came back from that as soon as she could, kept playing. So in some ways I kind of understand that maybe there are things that are difficult at the moment which she would have pushed through previously, but at this point she's saying, fuck it, I've been doing this for long enough, it's time to give up.
Yeah, I'm sure that's part of it, but it just seems odd to me that she's going to keep playing domestic cricket. So it's not really a workload thing, it's a West Indies team thing, right? So whether that's she's fallen out with somebody, sounds like she might have, is that the way that Cricket West Indies are treating her or perceived to be treating her?
It didn't sound like a board problem.
Feels more like a dressing room thing,
It sounded like an 11 problem. But why has the 11 problem come to the fore during the Barbados
well, you can draw your own conclusions.
Yeah.
There are players in that a number of senior players from the West Indies team who are playing with Deandra here.
Yeah, so there are probably 5 there. Hayley Matthews is there, the Knight sisters, Shamelia Connell, Shakira Selman, sort of off the top of my head are the principal West Indies players who are in this team. But, I mean, the Barbados team looked pretty cheerful in their first game against Pakistan. They seemed to be having a pretty good time out there when they were bowling to the Pakistanis. So, and in some ways they looked more animated and more into it than the West Indies team sometimes does. Sometimes that West Indies side can look pretty diffident when they're out there on the field. So I didn't read anything in the body language that suggested there was a problem. She's been opening the batting with Hayley Matthews. I mean, when Hayley Matthews got out against Australia last night, she was walking off, bashing her bat into her pad like she was really annoyed. It wasn't like, I don't care,
Sure.
That didn't seem to be the way the body language was going. So, yeah, what is it that's... Or did she write this on the 1st of July? Has she known this for a while and only just put it out?
Yeah, that's a good point. Was this something that was always on the cards? I suppose we'll find out soon. By numbers, 126 T20 internationals, over 2,500 runs, a couple of tons, including the fastest ever, a 38 baller in 2010 against South Africa. She played 143 one-day internationals for nearly 4,000 runs at 30, including 3 centuries. So this year, Mitali Raj, Anya Shrubsole, Mignon de Prea, Catherine Brunt in Test cricket,
Julan Goswami,
Lizelle Lee, Amy Satterthwaite have all left the international stage, which... I mean, that happens often after a 50-over World Cup, but that's a pretty big transition. I mean, they would be the crux of more or less a World 11. Well, at least most of indeed all of the names on that page at one point or another have been near enough to the top of the rankings. So there is a lot happening behind the scenes in women's cricket right now, acknowledging that Satterthwaite wasn't ready to retire either.
And Leah Tahuhu, her wife, got cut by New Zealand cricket, and then they had to come crawling back and ask her to come back to the team because... they were short on fast bowlers and realised that they'd made a mistake.